For the millionth time, I love this question. Okay, so is it beneficial for society to have these age limits? I think yes. I think that it's important, like particularly with stuff like driving and stuff like that, that we need to limit, like to have restrictions on people who can drive and people who can't. And people who are too young to drive as one of the categories that we should restrict people from driving. And it's simply practical to set, a certain age when somebody becomes able to drive. I mean, of course, we're not saying that, the day before their birthday they're not mature enough to drive, and on the day of their birthday they're mature enough to drive. Of course, we're not saying that, but it's simply practical to, we have to draw the line somewhere. However, I mean, and driving is a really interesting case because, as far as I know, over in the US, I mean, it probably varies from state to state, but you guys get like a learner's permit and you're actually allowed to drive on your own right from the get-go, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. But like, of course, the idea is still that you, with your parents, are taught how to drive. Over here in Australia, or particularly New South Wales, it varies slightly from state to state over here as well, but I suspect not as much as over in the US. It's a lot more consistent over here. We have a four-stage system to getting the license, to getting the full driver's license. First, we have our L plates. Well, we have different plates that we have to put on the back and front of our car to indicate what kind of license we have. The first one is L plates for learners, and this one lasts 1 year, and we need 120 hours that need to be written down in a logbook, and you need to be supervised by a full licensed, adult driver in the front seat. When you've done your 120 hours, and that's actually recently changed, I think that 120 hours is ridiculous, and it just makes people, just really encourages people to just fake their logbooks, but that's another matter. When you've done your 120 hours, and it's 1 year since you got your L's, you can get your red Ps, that is provisional stage 1 license, and on this level you're allowed to drive on your own, and you're limited to a speed of 90 kilometers per hour. I'll put an annotation or something for conversion. By the way, for L plates you're restricted to 80 kilometers per hour. You have to hold red Ps for 1 year, and that's the only restriction. And then you get green Ps. It's provisional stage 2, and you are limited to 100 kilometers per hour, and you have to hold those for 2 years, and then you get your black license. There's also other restrictions along the way, like how heavy a trailer you can tow at different stages, and particularly the amount of alcohol you can have in your system while driving is, they say it's 0 for L and P platers, which is, I think is silly. I think it should be 0.01 or something, because you can have alcohol for medical purposes and things like that. But yet again, that's another video. But yeah, I think that this system is really, really good, that it introduces people to driving. I mean, I disagree with quite a few of the details, but I think having a system like this where you're allowed to learn to drive without having, the full sort of freedom of a full licensed driver, and you are able to build up your experience and finally get your license. I think this is a very good thing, and of course it's simply practical to have those definite age limits and time limits, where the day before you're not allowed and the day after you are allowed. I think it's really important that there's some way to gradually, not necessarily gradually, but to have a build up, and actually pretty much is gradual because over a few years, scratch that. gradual build up, right? But yeah, so I think it is beneficial for society to have these age limits. Oh, okay, alcohol in the US. This is one of the main things I did for this video. I did some research, and I was actually startled to find this, but I think Andrew was somewhat incorrect in what he said about how you're not allowed to drink in the US until the age of 21. In most states in the US, you are allowed to drink. You're just not allowed to purchase, and there are other restrictions about, handling alcohol and stuff like that. But you are allowed to consume alcohol under the age of 21. And in a lot of cases, you need like parental consent and private residence, but I think that's reasonable. However, the following states outright ban the consumption of alcohol. The states are Alabama, Colombia, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. Okay, now those are just less than half of the ones that I consider pretty much prohibit alcohol consumption. The other states that I'm about to list, they only allow underage alcohol consumption for religious, educational, or medical purposes. I wonder what the educational purpose is, but whatever. If somebody knows, please let me know. But yeah, the following states only allow underage consumption of alcohol for religious, alcohol, or medical purposes: Arizona, Michigan, North Carolina, North Dakota, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Utah, and Vermont. I found a really good website which lists summarizes all of the alcohol laws state by state. I'll put a link in the description. But yeah, I think that I agree with sort of Andrew's suggestion that it's a good idea to introduce alcohol, to have parents introduce alcohol to their kids earlier, with their consent and under their supervision. I think under their supervision, but I don't think it should be legislated that it's their supervision. Quite a number of states actually do legislate supervision and even specify visible presence, but anyway, I think it's enough for it to be private residence, and outside of that it should be the parents' responsibility. Anyway, yeah, I think it is a good idea to do that, to introduce gradually. Where are we? Shouldn't age of consent be more about cognitive progression? And you also said this about age of consent. You also said this about one other thing, I think, but cognitive progression. I think if somebody comes up with an idea, a practical way to legislate these restrictions based on cognitive progression, then that would be good, but I don't think there's a practical way to do it, which is why I think the age limit is pretty much the way to go. Okay, and why are there all of these logical inconsistencies, like you're allowed to drive, which, like you said, can be a lethal weapon. You're allowed to drive 5 years before you're allowed to drink, which I think I agree, is just crazy. And basically, the reason for that would be that these laws are sort of made somewhat independently. And at different times, people are going to have different influences. There's going to be, I don't know how the legislation works, but I assume there's some kind of voting, and there's going to be campaigns, and you're going to get different results at different times, different people, and different campaigns. So you can expect, some degree of inconsistency. I mean, the inconsistency is quite startling, and I don't know why there's so much inconsistency, but I think we can expect inconsistencies like that for some reason. Over here in Australia, by the way, with consumption of alcohol, you are allowed to consume alcohol underage in a private residence or under supervision of parents, but yeah, you're pretty much allowed, and there's no prohibition for underage people. But that's the end of the video. I think I have too much footage, so see ya.